My children looked me in the eye and said, "Mom, you'll be better there." Then they drove away, leaving me standing in a lobby that smelled like bleach and broken promises. Before we begin, make sure you like, subscribe, and turn on notifications so you never miss a powerful story. Also, download your ebook titled Suspense and Family Drama Short Stories by clicking the link in the pinned comment. My name is Evelyn Carter. I'm 72 years old, and for most of my life, I believe that if you loved your children hard enough, sacrificed deep enough, and gave everything you had, they would never turn their backs on you. I was wrong. There's a particular kind of pain that comes from being discarded by the people you raised. It's not like losing a spouse or a friend. It's deeper. It's the kind of hurt that sits in your chest at night and whispers, "You weren't worth keeping." I spent 40 years being a mother, braiding hair at midnight before school photos, working double shifts so they could go to college, sitting in hospital waiting rooms when they were sick, praying to God like my prayers had power. I thought love was a shield. I thought devotion was insurance. But life doesn't work that way. After my husband Alvin died, I watched my children slowly disappear. Not all at once. That would have been easier to name. It happened in inches. Missed calls, shortened visits, promises that turned into excuses. And then one day, they sat me down and told me they'd made a decision. Not with me, for me. "We found a place," my daughter said, her voice soft like she was comforting a child. "It's clean. It's safe. You'll have people around." What she didn't say was, "We don't want you anymore." I cried that day. Not because I was afraid of the nursing home, but because I finally understood that to my own children, I had become a burden they needed to unload. They packed my things, they signed papers, they smiled and hugged me and said all the right words, and then they left. I stood there in that strange building, clutching a blanket that didn't smell like home, and I made myself a promise. I would survive this. What I didn't know then, what none of us knew, was that 1 year later, everything would change. They would come back. But by then, I wouldn't be the same woman they left behind. And the truth they discovered, it would shake them to their core. This is my story. It started on a Tuesday morning in March. Rain tapping against the windows. The kind of quiet that makes you feel like the only person left in the world. I was making coffee, the same routine I'd done for 40 years. Alvin used to say I made the best coffee in Birmingham. 2 scoops, a pinch of cinnamon, just enough cream. But that morning, my mind was somewhere else. I was thinking about how Nina hadn't returned my call in 3 days, how Darius had borrowed money 2 weeks ago and hadn't even said thank you. I reached for the sugar bowl on the top shelf, and that's when my feet went out from under me. 1 second, I was standing. The next, I was on the floor, my wrist twisted at an angle that didn't look right. The pain shot through me so fast I couldn't even scream. I just laid there, staring at the ceiling, listening to the rain, wondering if this was how it would end, alone on a kitchen floor with nobody coming. 8 hours. That's how long I waited before someone found me. Not Nina, not Darius. My neighbor, Miss Loretta, who happened to come by to drop off some cornbread. She knocked, didn't get an answer, and thank God she had a spare key. The hospital said it was a fractured wrist. Clean break. 6 weeks in a cast. They asked if I had family to help me at home. I lied and said yes. When Nina found out, she called me on FaceTime. Her face filled the screen, eyebrows pulled together, lips pressed tight. The kind of expression people wear when they're about to deliver bad news, but want to look concerned. "Mom, this is serious," she said. "You can't be living alone anymore." I shifted the phone to my good hand.
I'm fine, baby. It was just an accident. Just an accident? Her voice went up an octave. Mom, you were on the floor for 8 hours. What if it had been worse? What if you'd hit your head? Darius chimed in from somewhere off screen. I heard him chewing. Yeah, Ma, this ain't safe. You need to be somewhere with people around. Just in case. Just in case. 2 words that sound like care, but feel like giving up. I can manage, I said quietly. I've been managing just fine. Nina sighed, the kind of sigh that says she's already made up her mind. We'll talk about it later. Just rest, okay? But we didn't talk about it. They planned it. 3 weeks later, they showed up at my door, together. That should have been my first clue. Nina and Darius barely spoke to each other most days, always bickering about something. But there they were, standing on my porch like a united front. Nina held a folder. Darius carried an empty suitcase. We need to talk, Nina said, walking past me into the living room. I followed them, my heart already sinking. They sat me down on my own couch, the one Alvin and I had picked out 30 years ago. And Nina opened the folder. Inside were brochures, glossy pages with smiling elderly people playing checkers and holding flowers. Golden Meadows, Nina said, sliding one across the coffee table. It's a beautiful facility, clean, accredited. They have activities, medical staff on site, everything you'd need. I stared at the brochure. A woman with silver hair laughed at something off camera. The tagline read, "Where care meets community." You want to put me in a nursing home? I said, not a question, a fact. Darius cleared his throat. It's not like that, Ma. It's just we worry about you. And with your wrist and everything, it makes sense. You'd be safer. Safer for who? I wanted to ask, but I already knew the answer. I don't want to go, I said, my voice barely above a whisper. Nina reached for my hand, her touch soft but firm. Mom, we've already looked into it. The room is ready. We can move you in this weekend. This weekend? My chest tightened. You didn't even ask me. We're asking now, Darius said, but his eyes were on his phone. I looked at Nina, really looked at her, searching for the little girl who used to crawl into my bed during thunderstorms, the one who said she'd never leave me. But she wasn't that little girl anymore. What if I say no? I asked. Her expression didn't change. Mom, please don't make this harder than it has to be. I wanted to scream. I wanted to throw them out of my house. But instead, I just sat there, feeling my whole world collapse into that glossy brochure. By Saturday, my bags were packed. Darius loaded them into his car while Nina walked me through the house one last time, making sure I hadn't forgotten anything. I stood in the doorway of the bedroom I'd shared with Alvin. The bed was still made, his reading glasses set on the nightstand. For a moment, I thought about refusing to leave, just planting myself right there and making them drag me out. But I didn't, because somewhere deep down, I'd started to believe what they were saying, that I was too much, that I couldn't take care of myself, that I was a problem that needed solving. The drive to Golden Meadows was silent. Nina tried to make small talk, pointing out landmarks like we were on some kind of road trip. Darius kept his eyes on the road. When we pulled up, the building looked nothing like the brochure. It was gray, functional, the kind of place designed to hold people, not help them live. They walked me inside, signed papers at the front desk, and led me to my room. It was small, a bed, a dresser, a window that overlooked the parking lot. It's cozy, Nina said, forcing a smile. Darius set his suitcase down. You'll get used to it, Ma. And then they hugged me. Quick, polite, the kind of hug you give someone at a funeral. We'll visit soon, Nina promised. I nodded, even though I didn't believe her. They left, and I stood there in that tiny room, holding a thin blanket that didn't smell like home, feeling more alone than I had ever had in my entire life. The first night, I didn't sleep. I sat on the edge of the bed, staring at the door, half expecting Nina or Darius to come back and say they'd made a mistake, that they were taking me home. But morning came, and they didn't. Golden Meadows ran on a schedule. Breakfast at 7, activities at 9, lunch at noon. It felt like being back in grade school, except everyone around me had given up on life. There was a woman named Miss Geraldine who sat by the window in the common room every single day. She wore the same blue cardigan, her hands folded in her lap, eyes fixed on the parking lot. "My son's coming today," she'd say to anyone who walked by. "He promised, said he'd be here by 2. But 2 o'clock would come and go, then 3, then 4. And Miss Geraldine would still be sitting there, waiting. I saw myself in her, and it terrified me. The other residents shuffled through the halls like ghosts. Some talked to themselves, others just stared. There was a man named Mr. Humphrey, who'd been a jazz musician. Now he spent his days humming tunes nobody else could hear. I cried a lot those first few weeks. Quiet tears that came at night when the hallway lights dimmed and the building settled into silence. I'd think about my kitchen, the garden Alvin and I had planted, the porch swing where we used to drink sweet tea and watch the sunset. All of it felt like another lifetime. But then something shifted. It started with Nurse Brenda. She was younger than me, maybe in her 40s, with kind eyes and a laugh that filled the whole room. She noticed me one morning sitting alone in the dining hall, barely touching my food. "Miss Evelyn," she said, pulling up a chair, "you gonna let that oatmeal go to waste?" I shrugged. "Not very hungry." She leaned in closer, her voice dropping. "I've seen a lot of people come through here. Some of them give up the first week. But you," she tapped the table, "you got too much fire in you to fade away like that." I looked up at her. "You don't know me." "Maybe not, but I know fighters when I see them, and you, Miss Evelyn, are a fighter." Something about the way she said it made me sit up a little straighter. After that, Brenda checked on me every day. Not because it was her job, because she cared. She'd bring me extra blankets, sit with me during lunch, tell me stories about her own mother. Then there was Jordan, the physical therapist. He was tall, probably in his 30s, with arms covered in tattoos and a smile that made you feel like everything was going to be okay. "All right, Miss Evelyn, let's get that wrist back in shape." The exercises hurt, but Jordan didn't let me quit. Life don't end because people forgot how to love you. It only ends when you forget how to love yourself. I repeated those words to myself every night. Slowly, I started living again. Not just existing, living. I began reading to the other residents. Some of them couldn't see well anymore, so I'd sit in the common room with a book and read out loud. Miss Geraldine stopped watching the parking lot and started listening to the stories. Mr. Humphrey hummed along. I organized prayer circles on Wednesday mornings. Nothing fancy, just a few of us holding hands and talking to God like he was sitting right there with us. And people started smiling again, including me. One afternoon, the director, Mrs. Hamilton, called me into her office. She was a no-nonsense woman, with silver hair pulled back tight and glasses perched on the edge of her nose. "Miss Carter," she said, gesturing for me to sit, "I've been watching you." My stomach dropped. Had I done something wrong? She continued, "You're different from the others. You've brought life back into this place. The residents respond to you. The staff talks about you." I didn't know what to say. She leaned forward, folding her hands on the desk. "I'd like to offer you a position, resident liaison and activity coordinator. Part-time, paid." I blinked. "You want to hire me?" "I want to give you purpose. And frankly, we need someone like you here." I stared at her, my throat tight. For the first time in months, someone wasn't trying to put me away. Someone was asking me to stay. "Yes," I whispered, "I'll do it." That night, I called Nina. Not because I needed her approval, but because I wanted her to know. "Mom, that's great," she said, her voice distracted. I heard dishes clanking in the background. "I'm glad you're staying busy." Staying busy. Like I'd taken up knitting. I didn't tell her how much it paid. I didn't tell her that I finally felt like myself again. Because the truth was, she wouldn't have understood. Golden Meadows wasn't my prison anymore. It was becoming my home.
3 months into my new position, I got a letter. It came in a plain white envelope with a law firm's return address stamped in the corner. I almost threw it away, thinking it was junk mail, but something made me open it. Inside was a single sheet of paper and a check. I had to read it 3 times before my brain could process what I was seeing. It was from Alvin's old company, back when he worked as an electrician. The company had offered employees stock options. Alvin bought a few shares every paycheck, nothing major, just a little bit here and there. I'd forgotten all about it after he died. But the company had been acquired 2 years ago, and those small shares, they'd multiplied. The check was for $780,000. I sat down on my bed, the paper trembling in my hands. My chest felt tight. My eyes burned. "Alvin," I whispered to the empty room, "you're still taking care of me." For a long time, I just sat there, holding that check, letting the weight of it settle over me. This wasn't just money, it was freedom. It was proof that even after everything, I wasn't forgotten. But I didn't tell anyone, not the staff, not the residents, and especially not Nina or Darius. I thought about calling them, thought about sharing the news, but something stopped me. Maybe it was the memory of them packing my bags without asking. Maybe it was the way they looked at me like I was a burden they needed to unload. Or maybe it was just instinct, the kind that tells you to protect yourself when you've been hurt. I opened a new bank account, changed my beneficiaries, made sure everything was in order. And for the first time in a long time, I felt powerful. Not because of the money, but because I had choices again. I kept working at Golden Meadows, kept reading to Miss Geraldine, kept leading prayer circles, kept living. But now I was living on my own terms. And when Nina called a few weeks later, asking if I needed anything, I smiled and said, "No, baby, I'm just fine." She had no idea how true that was.
A year passed. Seasons changed. I watched them all from the windows of Golden Meadows. Spring rains, summer heat, autumn leaves, winter frost. Each one marking time in a life I never expected to build. I'd almost stopped thinking about Nina and Darius, not because I didn't love them, but because I'd learned to live without needing them. Then Darius called. It was a Thursday afternoon. I was helping Mr. Humphrey with a jigsaw puzzle when my phone buzzed. His name flashed across the screen, and for a second, I considered not answering. But old habits die hard. I'm still a mother. "Ma," his voice came through, rougher than I remembered. "How you doing?" "I'm well, baby. How are you?" There was a pause, the kind that tells you someone's about to ask for something. "I'm, going through some things right now," he said. "Had some investments go south. Lost a good chunk of money, actually." I didn't respond, just waited. "Look, I was thinking," he continued, talking faster now. "You still got the house, right? Our house? Maybe it's time to think about selling it. We could split the money, and you're not even living there, so—" "You want to sell my house," I said flatly. "Our house, Ma. I mean, technically it's yours, but it's just sitting there empty, and I could really use—" "I have to go, Darius," I said. "Take care of yourself." I hung up before he could finish. My hands were shaking, not from anger, from clarity. He hadn't asked how I was sleeping, if I was eating well, if I was lonely. He'd gone straight to the house, to what he could get from me. 2 days later, Nina called. "Mom," her voice was warm, dripping with concern, "I've been thinking about you a lot lately."
That's nice, I said, folding towels in the laundry room. Be honest with me. Are you really happy there? Because if you're not, we can bring you home. We can figure something out. It's what family does. Family. That word again. I'm very happy here. But don't you miss your house? Your neighborhood? Your own space? I could hear what she wasn't saying. She wanted something. They both did. Nina, I need to ask you something, I said, setting down the towels. When was the last time you visited me? Silence. When was the last time you called just to talk? Not to ask for anything, just to see how I was doing. More silence. I have to go, she said finally, but think about what I said, okay? She hung up, and I knew they were coming. They showed up the following Tuesday, together, again. I was in my office, yes, my office, reviewing activity schedules for the month when Brenda knocked on the door. Ms. Evelyn, you have visitors. My stomach tightened. Who? Your daughter and son. I took a deep breath, smoothed down my blouse, and walked out to meet them. They were standing in the lobby, looking around like they'd walked into the wrong building. Nina wore a designer coat I'd never seen before. Darius had on new sneakers that probably cost more than my first car. When they saw me, their faces shifted. Confusion first, then something close to shock. Because I wasn't the woman they'd left here a year ago. I walked toward them with my head up, keys clipped to my belt, and a clipboard under my arm. Residents smiled at me as I passed. Staff waved. Mrs. Hamilton called out from her office, Evelyn, don't forget our meeting at 3. I won't, I called back. Nina blinked rapidly. Mom, are you working here? I am, I said simply. Darius looked around, taking in the renovations we had done over the past few months. Fresh paint, new furniture in the common areas, plants by every window. This place looks different, he said. We've made improvements, I said. I'm the resident liaison and activity coordinator. I help run things here. Nina's mouth opened, then closed. She glanced at Darius, then back at me. How much do they pay you? There it was, the real question. Enough, I said. Before she could press further, Brenda emerged from her office. She was wearing her reading glasses and carrying a folder. Evelyn, I have good news, she said, not noticing my children yet. The board approved your raise. Congratulations. You're now one of our highest paid staff members. She shook my hand warmly, then finally noticed Nina and Darius standing there. Oh, you must be Evelyn's children, she said. She's been a godsend to this facility. We're lucky to have her. With that, she headed back to her office. The silence that followed was deafening. Nina's face had gone pale. Darius stared at me like he was seeing me for the first time. Highest paid, she repeated. Mom, what exactly is going on? I gestured toward the garden. Let's talk outside. We walked through the hallways I now knew by heart. Miss Geraldine waved at me from her chair. Mr. Humphrey gave me a thumbs up. These people weren't just residents anymore. They were my family. The garden had become my favorite place. We'd planted roses last spring, added benches, created a small pond with goldfish. It was peaceful here. Safe. We sat down, the 3 of us, in the place where I'd cried alone so many times that first month. But I wasn't crying now. Nina folded her hands in her lap. Mom, we need to talk about the house. Do we? I asked. You're not using it. And honestly, it would help both of us out if you could sell the house and split the money, I finished for him. He had the decency to look embarrassed. I leaned back on the bench, looking up at the sky. It was blue, clear, beautiful. When you brought me here, You told me I'd be better off, that I couldn't take care of myself, that this was for my own good. Neither of them spoke. And maybe you were right. Not in the way you thought, but you were right. Because being here taught me something I'd forgotten. What's that? Nina asked, her voice small. That I don't need you to survive. The words hung in the air between us. I've built a life here, I said. I have purpose. I have people who value me. I wake up every morning knowing I matter. We never said you didn't matter, Nina protested. I looked at her, really looked at her. You didn't have to say it, baby. You showed me. Darius shifted uncomfortably. Ma, we made mistakes, we know that, but we're trying to make things right. By asking for my house? I asked. He couldn't meet my eyes. I stood up, brushing off my pants. I'm not angry with you. I was, but I'm not anymore. I just want you to understand something. They both looked up at me. I'm not the same woman you left in that lobby a year ago. I don't need rescuing. I don't need taking care of. And I definitely don't need you making decisions about my life anymore. Nina's eyes filled with tears, but I couldn't tell if they were real or just for show. Can we start over? She asked. I thought about it. Really thought about it. Maybe, I said, but on my terms this time.
We walked back inside, and I led them to the small conference room where we held family meetings. The afternoon light filtered through the blinds, casting stripes across the table. I asked them to sit. They did, exchanging nervous glances. I'd been preparing for this moment for months, ever since that letter arrived. Ever since I realized my children saw me as an inheritance, not a person. I need to tell you both something, I began, folding my hands on the table. They leaned forward, probably thinking I was about to announce I was coming home. After your father died, I said, I thought I had nothing, just the house, my pension, and my memories. I thought I was a burden you had to manage. Nina started to protest, but I held up my hand. Let me finish, I said. A few months ago, I received a letter from your father's old company. He'd bought stock options years ago. Small amounts, nothing we ever thought about. Darius's eyes widened slightly. The company was acquired, I continued. Those stocks became worth quite a bit of money. How much? Nina asked, her voice barely above a whisper. I met her gaze. $780,000. The room went completely silent. I could hear the clock ticking on the wall, could hear someone laughing in the hallway outside. You have almost $1 million? Darius said, his voice cracking. I do, I said calmly. Well, I did. I've been putting it to good use. Nina's hands gripped the edge of the table. What do you mean, you did? I've been investing in this place. New equipment, better furniture, renovations. I've also been helping other residents whose families forgot about them, paying for their medications, their comfort items, things insurance doesn't cover. You gave away our inheritance? Nina's voice went up an octave. I gave away my money, I corrected gently. It was never yours. Darius stood up, pacing. Ma, you can't be serious. Do you know what we could have done with that money? Yes, I said. I do. You would have bought things, paid off debts you shouldn't have accumulated, maybe taken a vacation, and then it would be gone,
and you'd be right back where you started." "That's not fair," Nina said, tears running down her face now. Real ones, I thought. But not because she loved me, because she'd lost something she thought was hers. I pulled out an envelope from my folder. Inside was a copy of my updated will. "I haven't given it all away," I said, sliding the papers across the table. Relief flashed across their faces. "But," I continued, "I've also been adding beneficiaries. Golden Meadows. Miss Loretta, who found me on that kitchen floor when neither of you came. The other residents here who've become my real family." Nina picked up the papers with shaking hands. She scanned them, her face going from red to white. "You're giving strangers our money?" she said. "I'm giving good people my money," I said. "People who showed up. People who cared." Darius sat back down, his head in his hands. "We made a mistake, Ma. We know that. But you can't punish us forever." His voice finally broke, and for the first time since they'd arrived, I heard something real in it. Not greed, not calculation, pain. "I'm not punishing you," I said, softly. "I'm teaching you." "Teaching us what?" Nina asked, wiping her eyes. "That love isn't automatic. That respect has to be earned. That you can't ignore someone for a year, show up when you need something, and expect them to be waiting with open arms." I stood up, walking to the window. Outside, residents were playing cards under the pergola we'd built. Miss Geraldine was laughing at something Mr. Humphrey said. "Your father used to say, 'Family first always.' I believed that with my whole heart, but family isn't just blood. It's who shows up, who stays, who loves you even when it's inconvenient." When I turned back, both of them were crying. Darius had his hands over his face. Nina was staring at the table. "I don't hate you," I said. "I could never hate you. You're my children. But I won't let you treat me like I'm disposable anymore." "What do we do now?" Darius asked, his voice muffled. I walked back to the table, placing my hands on the back of my chair. "You live your lives. You grow up. You learn. And if you want to be part of mine, you're welcome. But you come as equals, not as saviors, not as managers, as my children who respect their mother." Nina looked up at me, mascara running down her cheeks. "Can we try again?" I thought about all the nights I'd cried in that first month, all the times I'd waited by the phone, all the prayers I'd sent up asking God why my own children had abandoned me. But I also thought about Brenda's kindness, Jordan's wisdom, Mrs. Hamilton's respect, the way Miss Geraldine now smiled every morning, the way Mr. Humphrey hummed while I read to him. "Yes," I said finally, "but this time we do it right." Darius stood up and hugged me. His arms were tight around me, and I felt him shaking. Nina joined us, and for a moment we were just a mother and her children again. But when we pulled apart, I made sure they saw my eyes, made sure they understood. I was not the same woman anymore. And that woman, she was not going anywhere.
6 months have passed since that conversation in the conference room. Nina calls now, not every day, but regularly. Real calls, where she asks about my work, about the residents, about me. She visited last month and brought flowers, not expensive ones from some fancy shop, but sunflowers from a farmer's market, the kind I used to grow in our backyard.
Darius comes by every other week. He started helping with repairs around Golden Meadows, fixed the leak in Miss Geraldine's bathroom, built new shelves for our library. He doesn't ask for money anymore. Sometimes I catch him talking to Mr. Humphrey about old jazz records, and I see glimpses of the boy I raised. They're trying. That's all I can ask for. But things are different now. They don't make decisions for me. They don't treat me like I'm fragile. When they visit, they ask permission. They show respect. Because they finally understand that I don't need them to survive. I want them in my life, but I don't need them. There's a difference. Last week, Nina asked if I'd come to dinner at her house. I said yes. When I arrived, she'd cooked all my favorite foods, the recipes I taught her when she was little. We sat at her table, and for the first time in years, it felt like family again. Not perfect, but real. Darius brought his kids to visit last Sunday, my grandchildren. I hadn't seen them in over a year. They ran through the halls of Golden Meadows, bringing noise and laughter and life. The residents loved it. Miss Geraldine held the youngest one on her lap and cried happy tears. She said, "Your grandma is special. She saved us." I didn't save anyone. I just learned to save myself first. I still work here, still coordinate activities, still read to residents who can't see well anymore, still hold prayer circles on Wednesday mornings. This building that was supposed to be my ending became my beginning. The house? I kept it, but I rent it out now to a young family who needed a fresh start. The income goes into a fund, half for Golden Meadows, half for my grandchildren's education, because I want them to learn something their parents forgot, that you honor the people who came before you, not by taking from them, but by building on what they gave you. Sometimes, late at night, when the facility is quiet and I'm alone in my room, I think about that day Nina and Darius drove away. How small I felt, how abandoned. And then I look around at the life I've built, the friendships, the purpose, the peace. I think about Alvin and how he's still taking care of me even from heaven. I think about all the residents whose lives changed because I refused to give up. And I realize something. Being put in a nursing home didn't break me. It freed me. It freed me from needing validation from people who couldn't see my worth. It freed me from sacrificing myself for love that wasn't being returned. It freed me to discover that I was always enough, even when I was alone. My children didn't lose me when they put me here. They lost the version of me that would accept anything just to keep them close. And maybe that's what they needed to lose. So here's what I want you to hear, whoever's listening to this story. Don't wait until someone abandons you to discover your worth. Don't give so much of yourself that there's nothing left when people walk away. Love your parents. Honor them. Show up for them. Not because you owe them, not because you might inherit something someday, but because they're human beings who gave you life and deserve to be treated with dignity until their last breath. And if you're the one who's been pushed aside, forgotten, or treated like a burden, listen to me. Your story isn't over. Your value doesn't decrease because someone failed to see it. Get up. Build something new. Surround yourself with people who celebrate you, not just tolerate you. Because sometimes the greatest blessing is discovering you never needed permission to bloom. I'm 73 now. I walk these halls with purpose. I hold hands that shake. I listen to stories that matter. I laugh again. I live again. And every single day, I thank God that my children put me in a nursing home. Because it was here that I finally found myself. If this story touched your heart, please like, subscribe, and share it with someone who needs to hear it. Lastly, download your ebook titled Suspense and Family Drama Short Stories by clicking the link in the pinned comment. Thank you for listening, and remember, you are never too old, too forgotten, or too broken to start again.